At 6:18 a.m. on September 22, 2024, Tommy Wright stood beside a John Deere S790 combine with tracked undercarriage. Watching the moisture meter on his phone show 19.4%, while his rice drying facility 12 miles away was already operating at 94% capacity with 840,000 bushels awaiting processing. 58 years old, third-generation rice farmer, 2,400 acres under management in Arkansas County. The grain cart operator radioed, "Bin 3 is full. Bin 4 at 80%. We've got maybe 6 hours of storage left." His weather app showed thunderstorms forecast for tomorrow afternoon that would add 3 days of harvest delay if rice wasn't cut today. Standard practice said wait until moisture dropped below 18% to reduce drying costs and facility load. His drying contract with Riceland Foods charged 42 cents per bushel for moisture removal above 18%, adding $84,000 to his season costs if he harvested wet. Wright had 680 acres left to cut, storage nearly exhausted, and a facility bottleneck that could leave harvested rice sitting in trucks where quality degraded by the hour. He climbed into the combine cab. They'd harvest everything immediately, wet or not, and deal with the drying costs. Arkansas Delta Rice Harvest operates through America's most extensive agricultural drying network. 200-plus facilities processing 90 million bushels annually from 1.5 million acres, producing 50% of U.S. rice supply. Every August through October, rice must be mechanically harvested from flooded fields using specialized combines with track systems that prevent sinking, then moved within hours to drying facilities operating 24/7, where continuous flow dryers reduce moisture from 18 to 20% harvest levels to storage-safe 12 to 13% levels at rates up to 5,000 bushels per hour. The dried rice moves to milling facilities that remove hulls and bran, or directly to barge terminals where Mississippi River Transport connects Arkansas farms to Gulf Coast export facilities, shipping to 120 countries. This is agriculture dependent on post-harvest infrastructure, where timing windows measure in hours. Facility capacity determines harvest pace, and drying costs can consume 15 to 20% of gross revenue in wet years. Tommy Wright learned rice farming from his father, who learned from his grandfather, who converted cotton fields to rice in 1952 when the Arkansas Delta began flooding fields for irrigation and pest control. His grandfather had harvested maybe 3,000 bushels annually from 80 acres, hauling wet rice in trailers to a shared drying barn where fan-forced air took 3 days to reach safe moisture levels. His father expanded to 800 acres in 1985, building the first on-farm drying facility. A batch dryer processing 500 bushels every 8 hours, Wright took over in 1998, expanded to 2,400 acres, and upgraded to continuous flow drying capacity of 2,000 bushels per hour. But even that wasn't enough during peak harvest, when 680 acres produced 68,000 bushels in 3 days. The infrastructure required to support modern rice farming had grown faster than most operations could finance. The S790 combine Wright operated cost $520,000 new in 2020. Including the tracked undercarriage modification, adding $65,000 to handle flooded field conditions where wheeled combines would sink. The machine weighed 38,000 pounds, generated 440 horsepower, and cut rice at 4.2 miles per hour through 6-row headers spanning 25 feet. The tracks, made of reinforced rubber with embedded steel cables, distributed weight across larger surface area, allowing operation in fields with 2 to 4 inches of standing water. GPS guidance maintained straight rows. Yield monitors tracked productivity in real time. The grain tank held 300 bushels of wet rice, approximately 20,000 pounds at 19% moisture. Every function was engineered for speed, because rice quality degraded rapidly after reaching harvest maturity. Delay 3 days and yields dropped 8 to 12% from shattering, grains literally falling from heads before harvest. The window was unforgiving. The economics forced brutal calculations. At processor contract rates of $14.50 per hundredweight, 100 pounds, for long-grain rice. Each acre yielding 7,800 pounds generated $1,131 in gross revenue. Seed costs ran $180 per acre for certified disease-resistant varieties. Fertilizer added $240 per acre. Rice was nitrogen-intensive, requiring precise timing of applications through flooded fields. Flooding costs, including levee maintenance and water management, $145 per acre. Herbicides and fungicides, $110 per acre. On-harvest costs, including equipment operation and transport, $95 per acre. Drying costs at base 18% moisture, $58 per acre. Storage and handling, $35 per acre. Total operating costs, $863 per acre against $1,131 revenue. That left $268 profit per acre before equipment depreciation and land costs. Across 2,400 acres, Wright's operation generated $2.7 million in gross revenue and maybe $643,200 in operating profit. After fixed costs, actual net income around $185,000 for managing a $4.8 million operation. The margins were thin, even in good years. In wet years, when drying costs doubled, margins disappeared entirely. At 8:40 a.m., Wright had cut 120 acres and filled the grain cart 4 times. Each load, 1,000 bushels of wet rice, went immediately to trucks that hauled to his drying facility. The facility was a towering metal structure 60 feet tall, containing 2 continuous flow column dryers where rice moved slowly downward through heated air chambers. Natural gas burners generated heat. Fans forced hot air through rice columns. Moisture evaporated. The process took 4 hours per batch, after which dried rice moved to storage bins or directly to trucks for transport to Riceland's mill 40 miles away. The system worked efficiently when harvest pace matched drying capacity. When harvest exceeded capacity, rice backed up in holding bins where quality degraded from respiration heat and moisture migration. His phone rang at 10:20 a.m. and the facility manager. "Tommy, we're full. Bin 3 is packed. Bin 4 just topped off. I've got trucks backed up waiting to unload. You need to slow down or find alternative drying." Wright knew the alternatives. Riceland operated a commercial facility 18 miles south with capacity for outside contracts at 58 cents per bushel, 38% premium over on-farm costs. Using commercial drying would add $39,440 to his harvest expenses. But stopping harvest meant risking tomorrow's storm and potential shattering losses of $76,000 on unharvested acres. The math favored paying premium drying costs over weather-related crop loss. Contract with Riceland for 68,000 bushels at their facility. I'll keep cutting. The decision consumed most of his profit margin for the season. 1. Infrastructure bottleneck. His drying facility hitting capacity 3 days before harvest completion had reduced operating profit from $268 per acre to approximately $252 per acre. Multiply across 2,400 acres and $38,400 in profit evaporated into emergency drying costs. This was modern agriculture. Technically sophisticated, logistically complex, and financially fragile, where single bottlenecks destroyed margins. By 3:20 p.m., Wright had harvested 340 acres. The combines, He was running two machines simultaneously, his primary S790 and a contractor's Case WH operating adjacent sections, were processing rice faster than the drying network could absorb. The backup at Riceland's facility meant trucks waited 2 hours to unload. The delay created cascade effects. Grain carts sat idle while trucks were delayed. Combines stopped to wait for grain carts, and harvest pace dropped from 85 acres per hour to 52 acres per hour. And the system's efficiency had collapsed because one component, drying capacity, couldn't keep pace. His son Michael, who managed the farm's logistics from an office in Stuttgart, called at 4:45 p.m. "Dad, I found capacity at a facility in Lenoke County. They'll take 40,000 bushels at 52 cents per bushel. That's 22 miles away, but it's available now." Right accepted. Trucks rerouted to Lenoke County. The harvest resumed at full pace. By 8:30 p.m., working under the combine's LED lights, Wright finished the final acres. Total harvest: 2,400 acres producing 936,000 bushels of wet rice at average 19.2% moisture. The rice was distributed across 3 facilities: 530,000 bushels at his on-farm dryer, 278,000 bushels at Riceland's commercial facility, and 128,000 bushels at the Lenoke County operation. The coordination had worked. The costs had been extraordinary. Michael compiled the final numbers on September 24th after all rice was dried and delivered to Riceland's mill. It's a gross revenue at $14.50 per hundredweight, $2,714,400. Operating costs, including premium drying fees, $2,215,200. Net profit before fixed costs, $499,200. After equipment depreciation and loan payments, actual profit of $142,800. Down from the projected $185,000 due to wet harvest conditions forcing premium drying costs of $97,680 above budget. The operation had executed efficiently. Every acre harvested, every bushel dried and delivered on time. But the profit had collapsed from weather conditions Wright couldn't control, and infrastructure capacity he couldn't afford to expand. He met with Michael on September 27th to discuss next season. Michael showed projections. Rice processor contracts were offering $14.10 per hundredweight for 2025, down from this year's $14.50. Input costs were projected to rise 5% across seed, fertilizer, and fuel. The profit per acre would drop from $268 to approximately $205. At 2,400 acres, the operation would generate maybe $492,000 in operating profit, or $95,000 after fixed costs. The return on investment would fall to 2.0%. "Dad, we need either more acres to spread infrastructure costs, or we need to exit rice entirely and convert to soybeans where drying infrastructure isn't required." More acres means more debt. We're already leveraged at $1.8 million. Tomorrow, converting to soybeans means abandoning 3 generations of rice-growing knowledge and competing in a commodity market where margins are equally thin. Then what's the option? Wright didn't have an answer. The squeeze was systemic. Rice processors had consolidated. 3 companies controlled 68% of Arkansas rice milling. They dictated contract terms. Farmers competed for contracts by accepting lower rates. Drying facility costs had doubled over 15 years, while rice prices had increased maybe 22%. The infrastructure investment required to farm rice professionally had grown beyond what mid-sized operations could support profitably. too large to quit easily. Too small to compete with corporate farms running 10,000-plus acres with dedicated milling facilities. Tommy Wright continued rice farming through 2026, watching margins compress further as processor contract rates dropped to $13.85 per hundredweight, while operating costs climbed 7%. In spring 2027, his bank reviewed the operation's financial trajectory and declined to renew his equipment loan unless he provided additional collateral. Wright called Michael. "We're out of options. The numbers don't work anymore." Sell to one of the corporate operations? They're offering $4,800 per acre for land and $980,000 for equipment. After paying off debt, we'd net about $3.6 million. Michael ran scenarios. The family could retire on $3.6 million. Or they could take that capital, invest in commercial drying facilities as a service business, and support other farmers facing identical infrastructure bottlenecks. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. They'd exit farming to profit from the infrastructure constraints that had destroyed their own operations' viability. Wright accepted the land sale in June 2027 and invested $2.4 million in a commercial drying facility with 8,000 bushel per hour capacity. The business model was straightforward. Charge farmers 55 cents per bushel for drying services. Operate at 75% capacity during harvest season. We generate $1.1 million annually in revenue against $480,000 in operating costs. The facility became profitable in year 2. Wright had found a way to stay in agriculture, just not as a farmer. Arkansas Delta's 1.5 million acres continue producing 90 million bushels of rice annually, supplying 50% of U.S. consumption, generating $2.8 billion in revenue, flowing through 200-plus drying facilities that operate as the industry's critical bottleneck. The harvest happens every fall regardless of who owns the land. The drying network runs 24/7 regardless of who operates the facilities. The system functions through infrastructure that family operations pioneered but can no longer sustain profitably. The rice keeps flowing. The farmers keep exiting. The service providers keep profiting from the infrastructure gaps. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us preserve these histories of American agriculture's transformation. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and whether you understand the infrastructure pressures crushing family rice farms. Thank you for keeping their stories alive.